Recording is on. Okay, Jim Lemonlove's up next. As I said before, he's our guru of online data and tools, and has a leisurely 45-minute block of education lined out for us here. If you not satisfied by that, he'll be here tomorrow, correct, to even answer some more questions. We'll allocate a little time to talk more about it during tomorrow's morning session. But got a lot of slides. Here you go. Just put that on. Yeah, anywhere there's fine.
How's that? Oh, so you just click on that next to go. Okay, what I want to talk about today is how you can get public access. Anybody can get to our tools to get to the data or data itself. So you too can analyze FIA data. And you don't have to worry too much about my contact information because that's going to be the main take home. And you can find it about 100 places. So the FIA tools are the forest inventory and analysis web-based tools and data. There's interactive tools with user interface to generate reports. It's available all the time on the website. It's easy to access the national data. You can use FIDO and EVALIDator and download data with the DATAMART. Okay. And there's other FIA databases like the TPO and database and the National Woodland Owners database and things like that. So today we're going to talk about just an overview of the web page, how to get around, what it looks like. I'm only going to be able to do a brief introduction of FIDO and the other tools. FIDO is Forest Inventory Data Online. That's what the acronym is, and it produces tables, reports, and fairly simple maps. And there's another method of getting tables and reports called EVALIDator. Some people like it better. In some ways it's more simple and straightforward, but there are some other things it can do that is a little bit different than FIDO. And I'm going to give you an introduction to the DATAMART where you can download actual data sets of FIA data, and you get tools like a PC-based version of the EVALIDator tool and some other tools. So, how do you get to the FIA tools web page? Right here at our home page, this is the home page, the national home page of the FIA program, FIA FS Fed US. If you want to go straight to FIDO, there's a link there. This right-hand panel sometimes changes. This is an older screenshot. Right now, the FIDO, you have to scroll down a little bit to find it. But to get to all the tools, whoops, I missed. Just click right there on the FIA Data and Tools link is right there on the left side. Or, most browsers, if you just type in FIA Tools, you'll go straight to the FIA Tools and Data web page. And this is what the FIA Tools and Data web page looks like. These buttons across the top will take you to the various places. First one takes you to the FIDO tool. The next one takes you to the DATAMART, where you can download data. And the DATAMART also has, when we get to that part, it also has some very useful other links from there to help you with your various activities. The other reporting tools is, we'll look at that. That's where EVALIDator lives. That's the main one that we're going to look at over there, but it's also the home of the TPO database, the National Woodland Owners survey and our current links to the tool for FSBedge, not FSBedge, FBS. There's training and tutorial page that we usually skip by, but I just want to show you a quick shot of that. And the customer service page, which is just, we usually skip, which is, I'm also giving you a shot. We'll go there right now. This is what the the service page looks, customer service page. Right at the top, these are all the regional contacts. The states are divvied up. There's lists of states by each contact. It tells you which states they're responsible for, and they can help you the most. At the top of the list, you'll see me. So my contact information, my phone number, my email is right there. And if you scroll down further, you'll get links to the regional sites and the names of the program managers. You'll get Michael's name down there too. The training and tutorials page looks like this. We usually do some frequent webinars mostly on FIDO. This is the FIDO webinar PowerPoints. Many of the PowerPoints in my presentation were scalped off of there, so they're very similar. I keep moving the mouse. Up here we have exercises for the webinar, so you can actually step through guided exercises on FIDO. Whoops. There are some, the bottom of the page that I went past. Oh, I see how you do that right there. That one is the EVALIDator documentation for both the web and the PC versions. It's not quite as nice and up-to-date as the FIDO stuff, but I can help you with that. And you can click right there to sign up to be notified for future webinars on FIDO and other training. So, let's go to FIDO and see what it looks like. Click on that button and it takes you to the FIDO Welcome Page. First thing at the top of the page, again, is the regional contacts, and my name and contact information is at the top of that page as well. You can get standard reports out of FIDO. We keep telling people that this part of the program is going to change significantly. So we encourage people to use the custom reports right there. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on. The standard report procedures is very similar, but it's a little bit more simple and restricted. The other thing I forgot to mention is that as soon as the CIO updates the patch to push things through, there will be a new FIDO template and a new EVALIDator template. So I'm going to be showing some screenshots of some critical differences there that I thought were maybe important. Those are mostly just bug fixes. So you click on that little button to get to the custom reports, and then on the custom reports welcome page, down here it explains the 8 steps you need to do to create and run a report. It's really 7. The bottom one is how to save your report if you're inclined to do that. I'm not going to cover much of that today, but I can help anybody who wants to do that. So there's really only 7 steps. And you just have to click on that little button right there to start. So this is the next screen it takes you to, but this is a good place to explain the FIDO working screen. Every step in the process has this same screen layout. So go over what we're looking at. Over here are those 8 steps. You'll see that only the top one is active. That's where we are right now. It says start a new retrieval. The others are grayed out until you do something you can't get past here. Over here on the left-hand side of the screen is your options for choosing. This is where you choose your options. This is where you do your work for each step. In the middle of the screen is an interactive screen. This is at the end. This is where your report shows up. On some steps, there will be map interfaces that will show up there, and it'll show you information about where you're at on activities on the left-hand side of the screen. And you can make that, since it is where your report shows up, you have this little maximize window or button up at the upper right-hand corner that will make that that part of the window cover up all the other parts. Once you've done that, though, it's critical to remember that you have to hit the minimized version of it that shows up later, and not your back button. If you hit your back button, you'll lose everything you've done. And at the bottom of the page is a FIDO wizard, which tells you what you've done so far and what you need to do next. Right now, you'll see that it says, if you can read it, you must select a template from the list in the left in order to continue. So let's start that. Oh, before we start, the contacts are again at every FIDO page at the lower right-hand corner. Again, I'm at the top. And contacts got split in 2 lines. So how do we select one of these templates? There they are, but it's not clear what we have to do. All through FIDO, there are these, whoops, I hit the wrong button again. There are these little yellowish gold triangles next to items. Those are like the plus and minus in your computer browser button. They open more options when you click on it. So if we click on that area reports, it doesn't pop up in the middle of your screen. We just wanted to show you a little bit better close-up. You'll see that there are actually 8 templates involving area that you can select from. And there are lots of pre-made templates. There are the tree count reports, there are tree volume reports, there are tree carbon reports, tree biomass, tree growth, tree removals, tree mortality, and at the very bottom are the user-defined reports and the power user reports. User-defined report looks empty. That's where things get saved if you use your save retrieval option at the end. And the power user is probably best to stay clear of until you're really familiar with the data. So, how do we select a template? What happens is if you click right there with your pointer, right on the name of a template, in the middle screen pops up a lot of information about that template. There's a lengthy description of everything that goes into it, and also a description of what your report layout will be using that template. And if you're familiar with the data, if you look closely with that, you'll see familiar looking database names, field names that it's using there. In order to use that template, you just click on that, use as a template. And then, this is one place where the update is a little bit different. It breaks it up a little bit more. Basically what you do is you choose your summary attribute first, and there's little arrows. So if we want the same report we checked before, which was the volume, net volume by ownership and reserve status, we can click down those little yellow arrows and pick things. As soon as we pick that live trees greater than 5 inches diameter, this information in the center screen shows up, and then we can pick the layout in the center screen, and that's the ownership by reserve status. That's hopefully makes it a little bit more user friendly, and again you just click use as a template to continue. So now we go to our region of interest. Well, the first thing you notice is we skipped from the start a new retrieval all the way down to define your region of interest. That's because if we look at our FIDO wizard, we see that the next 3 steps, to select the summary attribute, the design report layout, and the select filter options, were already filled in to some extent by our template. However, you'll notice up on the right-hand side, all options are now available. If you want to change your report layout, or your filter options, or even your summary variable at this point, you can. So over on the in the working panel, there is a list of all the states, and you can scroll down and find other states. There's also an option in the interactive window to display a Google map. If you can get by without doing that, I'd recommend it. It slows down the process a lot to use the map, but it's kind of fun. People like it. So you click on there, the map comes up, and you might want to make that map a little bit bigger. Besides the maximize window, you can hide the wizard temporarily, which will cause the map to cover that part of the wizard page. Or, of course, you can use the maximize window, but then you won't be able to see the interaction between the left-hand panel and the map, which I really want to show you. And, of course, you have all the standard Google Map tools for zooming in and for panning around. So let's say we've panned in and come to Utah on the map, and we hid right here. You can see we've hidden the wizard so that our map is a little bit bigger. We usually tell people to go to the terrain option for the map display. It's the least annoying. I'd like to kind of be able to turn the whole thing off myself most of the time. All those backgrounds are a little confusing. However, say we wanted to select Utah. We have two options at this point. Keep missing. Right here, the little radio box button next to Utah, you can click there. Or on the map, you can click anywhere inside the state boundary. Either one of those options will have the same effect of putting a little check mark in Utah, and the map, Utah will turn purple on there. Have some other options. What happens, you may have noticed, there's a little drop down orange-yellow arrow next to Utah. If we open that up, I've skipped several steps. The first thing that happens on the map is that the county boundaries now show up. And we have survey units, which are groups of counties or counties that you can choose from. I selected the northern unit, survey unit, to get this, and it display. And it shows you all the counties that are selected in the northern survey unit. Again, you can click anywhere within a county on the map, and it'll select those counties as well. You can also select a circular boundary for your woodshop analysis and whatever. The way you do that is you first click on that circular boundary. Again, this slide is a little bit advanced. You won't, as soon as you click on that, the current, I think the new version is a little bit different, but that little upside down teardrop thing appears right in the center of your map extent, and its coordinates come and show up right there at the bottom. In the current interface, you can actually click on that little teardrop and move it around, or you can enter your coordinates exactly at the bottom. Then you enter a radius in miles, and when you click on that draw button at the bottom, then that pink circle shows up. The one thing that's needs to be pointed out is so you're only selecting plots within that pink circle. However, all the parts of that circle that you want plots to be selected from also have to be purple under the map. So if you selected somewhere over by Colorado and part of your pink circle went into Colorado, you'd also have to select Colorado if you wanted those plots. That gives you options. If you want to exclude some counties or some states from your circular retrieval, you can do that too. Just remember, everything has to be both purple and pink that you want selected. And you click the little continue button at the bottom to go to the next step. And I'm going to show you the interface for the FIDO update. It looks a little bit different. It's the new Google interface, and one thing is they made that terrain option the default, so it looks a little bit different. Again, the states are all listed over here. They function the same way. Everything functions the same way. But you do have to just click on display the map to get the map. It's not there initially. One difference is that the circular boundary is up here on the left now instead of at the bottom of the map. And I don't believe, I've tried it a little bit, I don't think it's quite as interactive. I think you have to manually put in your center coordinate. But there's also going to be a ecoregion function that works much the same. It'll draw the ecoregion that you select on the map, and it has to, and if it goes out of the state that you're looking at, you either have to not select other states or select them the way you want to. And then again, you click on continue to continue. I forgot to put that. Next thing that happens is you come to the survey year. Down here at the bottom of the wizard, you'll see that state is your region of interest now says Utah, but it still says that your survey year is not yet selected and it's required. So they're right up here, and you just have to pick one. It gets a little bit more complicated if you selected multiple states or multiple inventories. You might want to, at this point, if we opened one of those little buttons with the yellow drop-down window, we get a little bit description of what this, a little bit different description of what the survey years are. But if you pick more states, it'll tell you which survey years are available for which states, and there might be multiple ones that overlap between the two states. So you have to open it to select the state you want for the survey year you want. Again, you just clicked on continue to go on. Now you're ready to produce your report. However, at this point, there's a couple of things in those other options that we skipped that I really want to show that we get a lot of questions about that are some critical things. At this point, you can see that you can select any, you can go to any option and continue from there at this point. So you can back up. So let's go to the filters. You can see there's two types of filters. There are land or condition attributes and tree attributes. Right now, one of the ways you can get yourself into trouble with FIDO is by fooling around with tree attributes when you're working with area summary variable. To get area, you have to stick with attributes that apply to the entire plot, not trees that apply to the plot for however many trees there are on the plot. So that's you can get yourself into trouble doing that. However, what I'd like to show you is you open these up with the little yellow arrows, and the land filters look like this. And the thing I'd like to, the question we get a lot is, how do I get a specific national forest? First of all, you'll see that you can select any of these filters, but what that effect does, these boxes are mostly here to tell you that you have selected something within this category. If you select the entire category, you've selected everything, and the filter has no effect. So, for instance, if you just clicked on ownership group, you will have filtered on every ownership group, and you'd get the same table as if you did nothing. So you have to use the little drop-down arrows to get specific stuff. And it may go down for several layers of arrows. But down here near the bottom, you'll see one that says Administrative Forest Codes. And if you open up, you'll see this long list of forests. They're listed by their code, which begins with the region code. So if we're fooling around still with our Utah report, we'd have to scroll down until we start seeing 400s, because Utah is in region 4. And again, if I were to select one of these region 2 or region 1 or region 2 forests as my filter, and I had Utah as my area of interest, I'd either get an error message or an empty table, because I'd be filtering for a forest that doesn't exist in Utah. And it can be a little bit tricky how if some of the combined forests, the code may apply to the combined forest. You're probably safer picking both of the national forests on there. So on the tree filter, how do you pick individual trees? First of all, I just wanted to point out that right here we see a little gray arrow right there on the diameter classification. It says that the diameters are filtered for only trees 5 inches and greater. That's one of the filters that the template put in. So that's already there. You'll see it's there. But what about individual species? we see two things that mention species. One is a grouping of species into 4 major classes, and the other one is tree species groups. Most people would think the tree species group is the way to go, but let's open these both up. First of all, on the tree species group, we can select any tree species group we want, but they're not individual species if you look down there. Meanwhile, the other groupings are called pine, other softwoods, soft softwoods, and hard hardwoods. And I'm not sure how you tell the difference between a soft hardwood and a hard hardwood. So if you're looking for hardwoods, you're just going to have to look for it. Most of ours are soft hardwoods. But one thing we see is that there is a drop-down arrow next to those. So if we open the pine arrow, you see all the pine species. And those are listed in the order of the FIA species code. So there are ways to find out what those are. Now if we go to the design layout, again, when you're working here, at this point, if you click the little continue button at the bottom, it would try to take you to the produce report. So what you want to do is click on the buttons on the right-hand side to navigate around. You see there are table break attributes, row attributes, and column attributes. That's reflected in the wizard, and it'll tell you what each of those things are currently in the wizard. If you open those up, you'll see that there are geographic attributes, and those are available in the top two, in the tables and the rows. Land or condition attributes are available on any of them, and tree attributes are only available in rows and columns. And if you look closely, you can see that the table break attribute is a geographic attribute, and if you look in the wizard, it says that our table break is U.S. states, so that must be a geographic attribute. The other two are land attributes, so that's ownership and reserve status. So you can tell what those are. In this particular report that I'm using for an example, it doesn't show this, but many people in the interior West are confused or frustrated by the fact that if you pick a template that has forest types or species as a break, it's always forest type group or species group. The reason for this, in many areas of the country, if you pick species or forest type, you get an unmanageable table with zillions of rows and estimates that are too low to make big conclusions about them. In most of the interior West states, it's perfectly reasonable to look at species or forest type groups because there aren't that many. So what you would see when you open the land attributes is the forest type group would be the one that is selected, and all you have to do is select forest type right there in your report layout. Same is true for the tree attributes. Species group would be selected, and right below it is species. So you just select that one. And then you can run your report. So when you're ready to run your report, it says your report is ready to be displayed, and the title of your report shows up in the left-hand column. And all you have to do is click that submit button. It might take a while. It says your report has been submitted. You have to wait for the report to run. However, it says just wait, or it says you can start a new retrieval by clicking Start a New Retrieval, and you'll see that the button at the top is available for you to go. And you can go through all the steps with the next retrieval, and it'll show up in the list on the left-hand side when you get done. And there's a little, the radio button that's next to the report list will turn into a little spinning disc that tells you it's working. Then when it's ready, it says it's ready to be displayed. And over here are all the display options, and we want to look at those a little bit first. First of all, the general options, you can customize your table reports. You might want to, that changes some parts of the report, not all of them. Almost all of the templates have that remove emptied rows clicked. It's really unwieldy in most cases, but in some cases, if your rows are counties, you might want to see which counties don't have forest land, which is the case in a few states. And at the bottom, you see you can even click on to get metric output. And then these little drop-down windows, one says forest land. If you click on the arrow, you can toggle between forest land and timberland. That's kind of nice. In all of the other tables, forest land or timberland is an attribute for your summary attribute, and you have to select whether you want to see forest land or timberland right up front. So if you decided, oh, I really wanted timberland on this one, you have to start over in the other ones. This one you can just toggle right back and forth. The other one that says HTML table is the output format. You can also select a Google map. You can get comma separated values or a PDF. I'm just going to show you really quickly what the Google map output looks like, and not too much information on the other ones. But these mapping options, that's one of the mapping options are for the map output. Most significantly, it shows you the values, the way the maps just show you the county values. That's all it is, a chloropleth by county. But you can map by any row or column in your table, not just the totals. And then in the current interface, the export options, that's only applies to the CSV files, and the new version, the update, that will be changed to CSV options. So all you have to do is click on that display button, and however you set that up will display. And again, if you display your report and you decided you forgot something, you didn't want the empty rows in there or anything else, all you have to do is go back to your left panel, change it, hit display again. When you display it, there's your report right there in that window. And of course, probably want to maximize that in order to see it all at once. There's your report. At the top, there is a lot of information about how you set up your report, and that's good to keep if you're going to save that report. Then you have your table. If we had chosen more than one state or one inventory, there would be a table for each one and a summary table, and it's pretty smart about the summary table. It knows what sorts of tables it can combine and which ones it can't. So if we'd chosen 2 inventory years for Utah, it knows that you can't combine those, so it wouldn't sum them all up. The summary table would just be the bottom row. The totals are all from each one. But if we'd picked Utah and Idaho, you'd have a Idaho table, a Utah table, and a combined table. Then we see we have 3 different colors of numbers in the table. Those are referencing the error estimates associated with that estimate. Black is the best, that's less than 25% error. Green is 25 to 50%, and the gold or red ones are for errors over 50%, which is starting to mean that those are just coming from a few plots. So it's a little bit sketchy to say that those are set in stone, but you do know that those items exist in the state. Or if you mouse in the HTML, if you hover your mouse over any of those estimates, a little call-out box will pop up and tell you what the precise estimate is. So this one is red. We know it's over 50%. When we hover our mouse over it, a little thing comes up and says it's 66.8%. This is what the Google Map output looks like. You have your map. All your counties are a different color, and there's a little key to the right over there that tells you what the range is of. This is a volume report, so that's all in cubic foot volume totals for the state. And the nice thing is that if you click on any county, a little call out comes that tells you the name of the county and the code. Picked a bad county because it's Utah County and it has the same code as Utah has, but it's the county, not the state. And it tells you what the value is, so you can match it with the color codes on the right. So that's it for FIDO. Maybe we should take a little break and see if there's major questions about FIDO? Okay, we'll go right on to other reporting tools. When you click on other reporting tools, you get another set of tools. These SOL and COL are NCASI tools, and I'm not sure how they work. They do similar. SOL is Southern Online Estimator, and COL is the Carbon Online Estimator. It's another way to get carbon reports. And there's the National Woodland Owner Table Maker and the RPO, the TPO reporting tools, the timber products. This is an older screenshot. Currently, there's also another button that gives you information on how to access. It doesn't take you straight to the tool, but it gives you information with the web links and everything about how to get the FBS tool for FIA data. So if you just click on the EVALIDator button, this is what pops up. First thing you notice at the top, it says step 1 of 3. So there's only 3 steps. So it's pretty straightforward. Again, you can do a state retrieval or a circular retrieval, and then there's some rather incomprehensible geographic retrievals. I'm not sure exactly how they work. But down here you just, whoops, missed it again. You can choose a summary out. The main thing you want to do is choose your summary attribute. If you can see those, you can see that first the 2 of the top ones are area of forest land and area of timberland. And in FIDO, again, you just had to pick area, and then at the end you could toggle between forest land and timberland. So just choose your summary. This one says there's 101 things to choose from. Every time a new version comes out, there's more. I think there's 120 something in the new interface. Then you just click on the Submit button. However, in the new interface, there's something that people have been, with the new update, there are 2 buttons. One says Population Estimates, and that's what is the same as current. That's the same as clicking on the Continue button. Or there are Ratio Estimates. We've been struggling with a long time to get ratio estimates. The actual estimates for ratios like trees per acre or biomass per acre, the estimates are pretty easy to do, but there's 2 problems. One is the variance around that estimate isn't easy to do, and the other thing is that if you're doing it by hand, it's really easy to calculate a value that doesn't make sense, wherein your numerator and denominator don't match exactly. So the advantages of having a tool is it forces you to match the numerator and denominator to the same domain, and it gives you the error estimates. So next, if you hit continue, you can go to step 2 of 3. Oh, and the ratio estimates, sorry. The ratio estimates, the summary variable that you just selected becomes the numerator. And from there you go on to pick the denominator. This is step 2 of 3, and your objective, first thing is it shows you what your results from step 1 are. And all you have to do, in this case, you choose the combination of the state and the year. So there's a lot of these. It can be rather frustrating to find the one you want. These are filtered out depending on the attribute you chose initially, which of these are valid estimates for that, which ones can provide that estimate. In a lot of cases, the older periodic data can't provide certain estimates. Then you just click Continue again. So you come to step 3 of 3. This is the multi-step. This is where, first of all, you set out your page, row, and column setup for your table. These choices are slightly different in this tool than FIDO. In some cases, the classification of continuous variables like diameter classes or stand age are a little bit different than in FIDO. This one also has some really funny ones that tell you more about the inventory than they do, the inventory procedures than they do about the resource out on the ground. Like you can sort by which subplot trees were measured on. But in this choice, you only see tree-based options if you're using a tree summary attribute. So it's not as easy as FIDO to get yourself into trouble by sorting area by tree variables. And if we scroll down a little bit, we start to see our filtering options. We can filter by a lot of things. This is where we can pick counties. You have ownership groups and classes. You can pick your national forests here. You can put in a range of stand age that you want to analyze, even a range of slopes. All your forest types are over here. And you can pick stand origin, site class, or even physiographic class. And then if you chose a tree option, that shot's from an area table. Only if you're using a tree summary attribute do you see these options. And there's your species groups and your individual species, and you can also pick a diameter range. Below that is the old custom SQL filter, which used to be the only option. It's not as hard as it looks. It just adds a little and into the where clause, and if you can see the example, the other thing that's confusing is if I want to, is that we put quotes in there to offset that phrase from the rest of the sentence that it appears in, but they don't have to be put in the text box. So that's, if you wanted to follow that example, that's exactly what you would type into that box, and that restricts it to National Forest Service lands. And again, we see our step 2 by the time we get to the bottom. This is all on one page that you scroll down for a long time. You see the step 2 results, and you just have to say show the results, and the results look like this. You get a little table. It has your report parameters at the top. One thing that's a little bit strange about this and the other EVALIDator that takes a little bit getting used to is your totals, rows, and columns are at the top and the left rather than traditional bottom and right. And those are all your estimates. And if you scroll down a little bit, you see there's a sampling error percent, and what you see is a corresponding table that's laid out the same as the other one, so you just match the table cells to get the error that goes with each estimate in the other table. So those are your sampling errors in percent. And again, we've just added all these things because people had, kept saying we need to put information about what it is you're looking at. There's a long list of descriptions. If you haven't read the field manual or the database user's manual in a while, you can read everything that's gone into your, down to what a tree is. And any questions on EVALIDator? That's the web-based EVALIDator. We'll go to the DATAMART. DATAMART looks like this. Again, on the DATAMART, those are all the contact information right there. My name's at the top of the list as well. Then you see these 2 maps. The one on the left gives you raw data files in comma-separated format for any state. Since the database, Troy mentioned that the database is a monster, the way we can make the manageable bytes of the database available is to provide it one state at a time. So if you want the comma-separated file and you can load them into some sort of a database manipulation tool that you might have, you just click on the map for the state or states you want, and you'll download the data. And you'll see the beginning of tables at the bottom of the page. That again is a long scroll down. You can go down and select any individual table you want to pick. You just want the tree table for Alabama. You can go find it, and it begins with the reference tables. These are reference tables at the top. On the other hand, the table on the right gives you all the same data tables, but they're preloaded into an Access database. So if you have Access database available, this is a good way to use the data. The database has preloaded queries that are a good way to get you started on doing your own queries, and it has tools that are written in the forms in the database, including the PC EVALIDator. That's where the PC version of the EVALIDator is. Up in the upper left are the places where you can go, are the other database, the other web links that are good to, if you're going to be downloading the data, there's a lot of these that you really need. First of all is the database documentation. We won't actually go there right now. You can also get there through the FIA library. But if you're going to be using this raw data, I would strongly suggest you go figure out how to use those. The next thing is the recent load history. I do want to show you this. That's where you get this map. And this is an old map. I was going to update this slide too, but it was just too depressing. But you get the map that tells what the latest data is for each state. And then it tells you when it was updated. So if you're using if you're downloading the data to your hard drive, wherever that might be, the advantage is you're not dependent on the web being available and running rapidly, but you don't get updates to the data. So this is a good place to look to make sure that your data that you're working with are still valid. It tells you what this is from. This is from a year ago. And then again, if you scroll down, if you really want to get it in the nitty-gritty details, it tells you exactly what every data load, what was the reason for the load. And then there's a big table of population estimates, which is really unwieldy and difficult to look at. But you can get standard reports by state. If we look over there, again, we get a state report. You can get they come in Excel files with multiple worksheets for all the tables. You can get them for the 48 coterminous states. The reason we only have those 48 states is because interior Alaska isn't being surveyed and Hawaii isn't being surveyed. You're supposed to be able to get a table set for the National Forest Service lands. Yesterday I tried to download it. It was empty, so I'll have to look into that. But you can get all the National Forest Service lands because the part of Alaska that they do is the part that has a national forest, and they're in the national forest in Hawaii. Or if you click on a state, you can get a whole set of tables for the state. So these are all the standard tables. You don't have to use a tool or anything. Just download this, and it might have the table you want for your state. And below that, to scroll down, is the list of all the tables for the state and what's inside. So if we click on a state to download it, if we want to look at the tool or the database that you get, you just get the little standard download stuff and you save your file wherever you want it, and then you unzip it. What time is it? Time for Tracy? That's the end of this. Okay. Any questions? Yeah, I have available the access database for Utah that I downloaded yesterday that I could just step you through and just show you some just the basic stuff and where to find the tools, things like that. You can also, in the newer downloads or in the access database, there's also a ratio estimator in that too. Questions? Okay then.
I'm going to talk about FIESTA. It's a forest inventory estimation analysis tool similar to what Jim was just talking about. It's a party in a box. It's currently under development right now, and with hands in it from Paul Patterson, Liz Freeman, and Gretchen Moisen. One of the most important jobs of Gretchen was coming up with the acronym. So that was very valuable. Also, it's nice to think of this as a party and a happy thing, because it's very difficult to program, and so I need to have that happy place, and so it's good to just keep that name going. So, why the party? Well, we need a flexible estimation engine that we can use to answer any question using ancillary data we think is best whenever we want. So, in other words, the most important thing is whenever we want and whatever we want. So having the flexibility to do this is the most important thing. Similar to EVALIDator and FIDO, they have a lot of canned queries and templates. We were hoping to be more adaptable, a little bit more adaptable, and be able to accommodate some of the questions that we come into. So a little history on how it began. It started with some requests that we had from the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They were looking at the San Carlos Reservation and some of the western reservations and wanting to do a little strategic planning. So they were looking at mainly the woodland areas and wanted to see what kind of data that we had available within the boundaries before they started planning other things. They were considering planning a more intensified inventory in places that we didn't have data available. So the first step was to come to us and look for what we had and what kind of estimates we had and what the standard errors were. And if some of these were less than 20%, then maybe that will be sufficient for their analysis. So we had a boundary, the tribal land boundary, and so we didn't have a kind of a way to do the estimation within that boundary. That was sort of the start of it. So with Paul and Liz began developing these equations in a statistical package environment, and so that we could kind of do our own estimation process. Another example, we have the Nevada photo-based inventory pilot. So we had different ancillary data that we were using and a photo sample. So we had something a little out of the ordinary of the inventory of FIA process. So we needed to develop a couple more different equations, some variance equations, and we had different stratification we were using. So again, we were just looking for something that a little bit more flexible than using EVALIDator or FIDO. So we decided to use it in this Cran R environment. So this is a statistical package. It's extremely powerful statistical graphical environment. It's an open source C-based programming language, and it's maintained and supported by community developers. So the most important thing here is that it's open source, and it is, and there's a lot of developing within it of add-on packages from the community users. This FIESTA is going to be a package that you can also import into R, and what it is just a whole bunch of functions that are useful for a particular need, and they're organized within one package, and then you can add them into R and use them. So this has become really growing in popularity in the scientific community, and there's tons of packages out there that are available within R. So what should we bring to this party? Well, again, we are looking, you bring your user-defined polygon in the area of your interest and your population interest that you're interested in. Your favorite stratification. So Doesn't have to be an FIA-based stratification. You can bring different things like satellite imagery or classification, vegetation classification maps, whatever you are interested in there. Bring a list of attributes, so whatever variables you're interested in that we collect on the plots, we can basically run estimations for that. And bring a good attitude. And right now, a lot of patience, because it's taking some time. And, you know, Jim went through this pretty detailed, so I don't need to do it, but this is just to give you, let you know that there are the FIA data tools, and they're very valuable, and they can do a whole lot. And there's a lot of different canned templates out there that are probably what you're going to be mostly interested in. With FIDO and EVALIDator. FIESTA is kind of started as an in-house tool, but with the theory that maybe it can be useful outside once it gets all the bugs out. So as a comparison to the DATAMART end of it, FIESTA is able to access the Oracle database. The DATAMART is web or PC Microsoft Access based, whereas this is FIESTA is a R package. The DATAMART it's public based, so you're using fuzzed and swapped coordinates where we can access the actual coordinates. It's using the DATAMART has national core data where FIESTA can access some of the regional data available to us, and again it's public and Microsoft Access based or web-based, and for now it's in-house Oracle if you have permission for our Oracle database. But the package will also be able to tap into the Access database, so you can download from the DATAMART your Access database and then run the estimation equations from that database. The same tool or the same tables exist in Oracle as the Access database. It's just that we have more flexibility on the data we can get. So as far as some of the estimation tools, again, the FIA tools, they mostly run on state populations. So, and FIESTA is more of user-defined population, so we can add a shapefile polygon boundary. The FIA tools, they allow you to do some spatial clipping, but the estimations are based on a state population and then they're clipped from there. Whereas in FIESTA, the estimation unit is actually the polygon of interest. As far as FIA tools, it's FIA-based strata, so there's one strata within the database, and most estimates are based on that. Whereas FIESTA, as I said before, you can use any stratification layer you want, as long as there's enough plots per strata in that exist there. The FIA DATAMART, as Jim said, it can do non-ratio and ratio estimators. FIESTA can now do both non-ratio and ratio estimators, thanks to Paul Patterson. The FIA DATAMART, also the Access database queries, where we saw a lot of templates of the canned queries that EVALIDator and FIDO can do. FIESTA, it's programmable in R, so you have more flexibility on the queries, and you can also run them as a program, so you can loop it or do whatever you want in there. It's sort of nice that way. DATAMART also predefined categories, whereas FIESTA user-defined categories, a similar theory to that. FIESTA, you can make your own diameter classes or things like that, whereas the DATAMART it's pretty much what they have in there. Evaluation years, also we saw the EVALIDator, they have a specific time frame where the inventory years you can select from. FIESTA, you can use individual annual estimates if you wanted just for 1 year, so you can select that out of there. DATAMART web and Excel output, as we saw, and FIESTA you can output as an R object, so you can get the output from that and use it in some other statistical analysis using R, or dump it out as an Excel output as well. The DATAMART, it's web friendly. We saw it's complicated, but yet it's very effective. FIESTA, you have to know a little bit more about R and the programming, and so there's a learning curve on that end of it. My slides didn't work too well, but so some of the other things that FIESTA can do, it's also able to do plot level summaries. So more so for modeling or mapping. So you can get the tree data and summarize like volume of lodgepole by plot or by condition or whatever you want on that end. There's also other data manipulation tools within there, like frequency tables and bar plots you can do, and spatial data manipulation tools. So you can do some spatial clipping and pixel polygon data extractions. Just recently, R has a community developer has come up with more spatial packages within there. So that's been nice to be able to do a lot of that spatial stuff right within R. Also, adaptability. So in the future, we're hoping we can add things to this program, like maybe some small area estimation routines or some other mapping or moving averages or other estimation scenarios within that. So that's the biggest thing, making it adaptable and, again, doing so we can basically do whatever we want without some of the restrictions. So ways that we're trying to validate this, basically we run FIESTA and at a state level and compare that with a validator. So we're making sure that we're getting the same answers as they are. This is just an example of the area of forest land and the estimate, and also the sampling error percent. So just to make sure our equations are right and everything is running smoothly. Same thing with the non-ratio and the ratio estimators. Just making sure that we're comparing with a validator, and it's looking pretty good. Our differences are very, very small. So it's going well. This is just to show you, this is a common R help screen where there's several functions within the package, and then there'll be a help file for each. The functions are parameter based, so you put in the parameters that you're interested in, and you just run the function. Now, just to show you some of the examples of what it can do. An area forest type group by National Forest, Utah. This example, just to show, I ran it with a different stratification scheme, and using the National Forest as a polygon boundary as the estimation units. Also, live volume of lodgepole pine by measurement year in Colorado. Mike Thompson has been working a lot with the mortality of lodgepole pine, so we decided to see what FIESTA could do as far as that year-to-year estimates and compare that with his estimates. So this is the area. This is just to show you that I had a stratification of elevation, just 3 classes of elevation, and you just import the raster into R, and it'll create this strata table with just strata and acres associated with it. That's the most important thing, is getting the acreage of the strata and then attaching the strata value to each plot. Those are the basics of what you need for the data. And then you can output different, this is just different classes of forest type by National Forest. So this is the estimation unit is National Forest here. And so I was able to collapse our regular forest type codes into just 3 categories and then run the estimation from that. And this is the example of the live volume of lodgepole pine. So this is just to show you that we started at a state level to, again, compare that with what the results from EVALIDator, just to make sure that we were on track with everything. And the differences were very, very minimal, very small, just rounding errors, basically. And then we produced a chart from 2002 to 2009. So those are all independent year estimates of lodgepole pine volume, net live volume. So with the standard errors associated with them. So, and similar to what Mike was finding, you know, there's a lot less lodgepole now than there was in 2002. Most likely the beetle damage. That's really it, and it's short and sweet. Just to give you a little introduction of what's to come. The status is it's still working out the bugs, but it's going to happen soon. Again, it's right now it's really effective for us in the techniques to use for different requests that we're getting. But hopefully, you know, I'll get it out to maybe a public could use it if they are interested or are familiar with R. No. The CAN tools. The last graph, the CAN. Oh. The last graph, the CAN tools can't present. Oh, right, they can't because it's an annual, because it's a year-to-year estimate. So will it be fun? Hopefully, right now it's not real fun, but questions? Wait, questions? Sure, I'll take questions. Yeah, so the question is if you need Oracle database to run the FIESTA. So you do if you want to get the data, but I'm thinking I'll probably leave that part out of the package and just run it at the estimation. So if you have FIA data that you've downloaded from the DATAMART, you can access the access table through that, the same kind of link. It's a ODBC link that will get you there. And so you can run it off that. Or if you have a comma delimited file already from EVALIDator or somewhere else, you should be able to run it using fuzz coordinates, right? Or if somehow you have the real coordinates. It really just runs off of any table that you have. There's some criteria that you need whatever kind of estimate you're doing, area versus tree data and things like that. But yep, that's the theory. Right. Right, Jim Menla was just commenting on how the fuzzed coordinates are sometimes just as effective as the real coordinates. Any other questions?
I just wanted to show you this Access database really quickly. Oh. To the, but that one. See if we can, just wanted to walk you through this Access database if we can. Ah, there it is. I'm going to minimize this. It's really, well, this is the EVALIDator version that comes with the Access database. I just want to walk through, are we getting there? If we look through the different types of objects here, we can look at the tables. These are all the tables that are in the database, but they only have Utah data, but for every inventory of Utah that's available. In addition, there are a couple of tables that help the tools work a little, that help the tables work, and there are a couple of tables that make estimates a little bit easier. If we look at the queries, you'll see there's a whole list of preloaded queries. Let's just run this, let's see what happens if we run the area of forest land right there. See how long it takes. If it takes too long, we won't worry too much about it. Doesn't like it. It will pop up. Or with in this objects called forms is where all the tools are. Right here near the top is the EVALIDator reports, which is already open. You can delete all the data in the tables, which would be handy. That's what you have to do if you want updated data. It might be just easier to download a new Access database, but if you have queries already in there that would work on updated data, you can get rid of the data, and then down here is load a state's data. So you can reload the state's data, and if you click on those tools, it has instructions of what you need to do. And the way you do that is to download the comma delimited files, and then it tells you there's you unzip them, and then it tells you to go find one specific table and simply select it, and it loads in really quickly. And you can actually load in another state's data. Some of the north central states, the lake states, have a lot of data, and you can't load in another state's data because you hit the access limits. However, I actually have one of these access database bases with all of the current data for the interior west in it. So it's pretty easy to load an adjacent state, and so you can run queries on two states at once. Down here's the ratio of means estimator. But we'll step through this EVALIDator. The first thing you do, just like on the web-based version, is that you pick your summary variable. So the default one is area of forest land. They aren't arranged as nicely as on the web-based EVALIDator. These numbers are the numbers in the table that tells what they are. So they're not in exact order, so you might have to hunt and peg. But you just click on that step 1 button, continue, and then it tells you all the evaluations, much like the other EVALIDator. So we just select the most recent Utah, and then down here you set up your pages, your rows, and we could do, these are all alphabetical, so they're easier. We can do forest type by stand size, standard. They used to have only that, the older version, if you've had these, only had the text input filter option available, and it was on the same page. Now we've added on some of the pre-selected filters, so you have to go to another page to get there. So the way you do that is click on that Add Filters. And it doesn't like me to do anything. There they are. So you can select all the counties and forests and stand sizes and stuff. And if you want to scroll down, you still have your text box. That's still usually the way I do it in these things. I find it very handy. Some people are very intimidated by it. You'll see up here under the filters is a geographic filter where you can do a circular retrieval. The other one is you can actually create a polygon. You can, by entering vertexes, you can maybe get a KML file or something like that. Tracy tried that with when she was doing that Indian reservation stuff, and found that there's a limit on the number of vertexes. So if you've got something like a river or a ridge line that is a boundary, you might have to do some generalization to make it work in here. But a simple polygon works. And then you just hit return to come back to the EVALIDator. And right here in this little filter box where the thing is flashing, it'll show you what you've selected. So you just hit that run button, and what it does is it creates another file. It'll pop up here, and it's an HTML file, and it looks practically identical. I always call these test. And it just overwrites them. And you just, when you hit open, it automatically goes there. And it looks a lot like the web-based EVALIDator. So there's your table. There's your corresponding table of errors. And there's your long list of descriptions. Oh! It's lagging. That's the confidential, yeah. Anyway, it's quite easy with some of the instructions on the web page for the EVALIDator documentation on the tutorials and help and tutorial page tell you how to attach spatial data and modify the Visual Basic that runs these forms. If you're doing that, it's fairly easy to do that kind of thing. But right now, there's the two things that FIESTA does. Is if you read the Green Book of Death, it'll tell you if you want to do a smaller area estimation, a subset of plots, that you're supposed to do what what FIESTA does. But if you get into the database in order to do that, it's a rather clunky process with a lot of opportunities to make mistakes. And the other thing is that the sets of plots that are used for the standard estimates are table-based in the Oracle database. And the more sets of plots that you have available in the database, they're called evaluations, sets of plots that you can use to make an estimate. We call them evaluations. So in all the tables that define and pick the evaluations, you need a variable that identifies the evaluation, and that's called EVALID in all the tables. So that's why it's quite clever. That's where the name EVALIDator comes from. But anyway, it gets rather out of hand really quickly. So in order to provide the flexibility that FIESTA provides, we really need to come up with a way like FIESTA does to establish those groups of plots and give them assign them all their weights and adjustments and all that more on the fly instead of having all that stuff stored in an Oracle database somewhere. Also on this yeah. So yeah, too bad you can't see this. Sorry. Yeah, we could, yeah. It looks just the same as, basically the same. There are a couple of, in the ratio estimate in particular, I'm thinking both the web-based and the PC version actually give you some SQL code that you can run a query to test it and do some modifications. The only difference is that on the web-based version of EVALIDator, it is Oracle SQL code, and when you do it on Access, it actually gives you the Access version of that SQL that will run in Access. There's a little bit, just enough difference that they crash if you try to crosswalk. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I think you're going to call that a morning. Got about an hour and 10 for lunch. You're going to try and start promptly at what, 1? I think most of the grazing in this area is slightly north